on the denture note, if you find, just as a, running a dental business, if you find somebody that is good at dentures, they're few and far between now because we don't do them the same way. The old techniques really required that you kind of really knew what you were doing.
Right.
And so that's a little bit more or less a lost art, getting more and more to be a lost art.
Sure.
But if you find somebody that's really good at dentures, you have found yourself one of the most patient, amazing, skilled, artistic people in all the world, because it is a true art. I mean, you're taking, let's call it, I don't know, the equivalent of $1,000 for a denture. I don't know how much a denture costs for patients or how much it used to, but let's say it was $1,000. So maybe the equivalent of a crown or two. And these patients are uncomfortable. It's like wearing a bad shoe, right? And they come back every time that shoe pinches them, and it's daily, and it's minute by minute, right? Everything you eat hurts your shoe,
Right.
If you have shoes that hurt, you take them off and you sit in the chair, but you can't always do that in public. And so the people that can really get a denture fitted and they can get it to get suction and be comfortable, those are true skilled masters of the craft, for sure.
Yeah, I've always heard that in dental school, that's the part that everybody, so it's required that you do that aspect at some point in dental school, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's very trying and difficult. And the patients, right, like and this is another topic we'll talk about at some point, but dentistry can be really frustrating because, and it's not the patient's fault, but we're doing things that they don't want to have done.
Right.
And we're kind of forcing it on them, or they're in a situation where it has to be forced on them. And you're trying to get through it together, but that frustration creates this barrier that just, it's like hitting against the wall all the time. And so it's a fantastic thing to see a true denture master get a denture in there.
Right.
When we were in dental school for that portion, we had to fit them in our school. And go through all the steps and all of that. And let me tell you, when you get out of school, you're not any good at dentures.
Right.
Like, by no means are you competent at dentures.
Right.
But they did have us go to the VA, and we had to spend maybe like 2 or 3 weeks there and kind of shadow. And specifically where I ended up, I don't know if that was true to everybody, but where I ended up was following a guy that all he did all day was dentures. And it was amazing. What would take me 2 hours to do poorly was 6 minutes for him, right? And did amazingly. Right. And like in that nature, getting a little bit off topic again, but in that nature, the people behind it, the lab techs, that if we're hiring somebody that's really good at setting teeth and doing a denture or doing denture teeth, you've also found a master of their craft. Right. So this VA story I'm telling you, the people that worked in that lab in the VA, it was this just thing of beautiful symbiosis. Right. It was the lab techs. They'd have one tooth put in, and that was it. And then they would just set the rest of the teeth on it because it would just follow that. Right. And they knew where it was every single time. It was pretty incredible to watch. But yeah, that frustration, that annoyance of being in a denture, most of the time people kind of get used to it. It's a thing of comfort because they know it now, right? They get through that hump and they get through that frustration, and then they kind of know it, and then it becomes scary to leave, because leaving it means some sort of surgery or something. And so for the most part, that was sort of a dead exercise, right? So that kind of didn't hit true. And then when I was in school, that kind of started to explode a lot more in the 2005 to 2015 era. Mm-hmm. And in that time, we started to get better made implants for this procedure. They were stronger, right? They could be smaller, so they could grab on to smaller amounts of bone and do a better job. Right. And then the parts started to fit kind of better and start working better. And I kind of am lucky in the fact that I caught the very beginning upswell wave of this, not for the chance to open my own business and do this, but I've gotten to see sort of all of the phases all jammed into one, right? If I was earlier, I wouldn't have sort of seen this part, because I wouldn't have, the digital part, because I wouldn't have gotten into it as early, or I would have been at the tail end.
Right.
And if I had gotten into it later, I wouldn't have known all of the other parts of it, right? The nuts and bolts of it. So that period right now is we're starting to get into this like sort of mature phase of hybrid dentistry. But in doing that, essentially this was always because they already had a denture to work with. There was a lot of different ways you could do it. I mean, you could just leave the denture in. You could put the implants in. You could leave the denture. After 3 months of wearing it, they would come back in. And this, in the tale of me having seen most of this, I've done pretty much all these different ways. This was the way that probably in the first 50 cases, maybe I did 15 of them this way, right?
Which is burying the implant.
Yeah, put the implants in, put a little cap on the implant and put it underneath the gums and let the gums tissue heal over. Patient would wear the denture for 3 months, and then we would come back in and uncover them, uncover them and do a little procedure there where we're playing hide and go seek with the implant. Right. That was always a lot of fun. And then we would put the abutment on, right? And the abutment is basically what is your attachment, right? It's the implant is your support, it's your structural beam, and then the abutment is essentially the screw that your picture frame is going to hang off of. And so it's sort of that translation, right? You've got the stud, the picture frame screw, and then the picture frame.
Right.
And so the abutment's sort of our screw. By the way, since this is only 2 episodes in, I speak in a lot of metaphors. Sometimes that helps people, and sometimes it doesn't.
No, that was a good metaphor.
But we would do that, and then we would take some records, we would take some impressions, and those impressions would be with very specific pieces that would tell the lab how to pour it up in stone and then start converting it into whatever you wanted to, right. Or however you were going to build those final teeth. Usually it was a denture, just a crappy acrylic denture, and that was sort of molded over top of a custom-made titanium bar. And when I say custom-made titanium bar, I am sure what you are thinking of is a milling machine and the grinding sound and all of that. But no, we're literally talking about casting it in a furnace, melting metal down and replacement, all of that stuff. Your typical real casting a form. And
that's
so wild times, right?
Right. You take for granted milling machines nowadays.
Yeah, we stand on the shoulders of giants for sure. But so that was sort of the end-to-end procedure, right? And the difficulty with that is working away from the denture patient. Now we're kind of into more what we would think of as a traditional hybrid patient, which is kind of anybody that has failing teeth or has some significant issues of some sort or has already lost a bunch of teeth, or maybe they don't have teeth, right? They can still be denture wearers. That patient would go through this sort of long, torturous process, right? And that was a very frustrating time, and that's sort of why we've kind of worked away from that as an industry. Is it's not that it doesn't work, right? Like we talked about last week. Everything we talk about, whether we kind of diss it or not, it works. It's mostly going to be to the standard of care. Find somebody that cares about you and put some effort into their work, but it's not about who's better or best or that kind of thing. It's going to work, right?
Sure.